The car sat in the corner of the auction hall like something nobody had bothered to throw away yet. Dust covered the hood in a thin gray film. The paint had blistered and peeled along the fenders, and the handwritten lot tag dangling from the side mirror read $5,000 to $8,000, no reserve. Nobody stood near it. Nobody even glanced at it. And then Vivian Ashford, the CEO of Ashford Prestige Auctions, the most powerful name in high-end estate sales in New York, walked past it, looked down at the man crouching beside it with a small flashlight in his hand, and said 4 words that everyone in earshot heard clearly: scrap metal, no value. The man in the worn work jacket didn't stand up. He didn't argue. He just kept looking at the undercarriage with the calm, unhurried attention of someone who already knew something the room did not. What did Devin Booker see in that car that an entire auction house full of experts missed? The answer is worth $8 million, and it starts with a lesson his father taught him a long time ago. Devin Booker loaded the last of his tools into the passenger footwell of his pickup at 6:45 on a Tuesday morning, checked the side mirror out of habit, and pulled out of the narrow Brooklyn street where his repair shop occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse. The sky was that particular shade of pale gray that comes before the city fully wakes up, and the traffic on the bridge was still light enough that he could see the East River clearly below. His reflection in the rearview mirror showed the same face he saw every morning: dark brown skin, a close-cut beard going slightly silver at the chin, tired but steady eyes, and the small scar on his left eyebrow he had earned at 12 years old helping his father lift an engine block that was heavier than either of them had wanted to admit. Imani sat in the seat beside him, 6 years old, her red fox-stuffed animal she called him Copper, tucked firmly under one arm. Her hair was in 2 careful twists that Devin had done himself the night before a Sunday ritual he had taught himself from YouTube videos in the first months after Naomi died, the comb and the shea butter laid out on the bathroom counter, while Imani sat on the closed toilet seat and told him stories about her week. She had her mother's habit of waking up completely alert. No groggy transition, just eyes open and already asking questions. "What's your favorite car in the whole world?" she asked, adjusting Copper's ear with the focused seriousness of someone arranging something important. Devin thought about it for a moment the way he always thought about Imani's questions, not quickly because she always knew when an answer was rushed. "A car? Nobody's looked at the right way yet," he said. She nodded as if this made complete sense. She settled back in the seat and watched the bridge cables pass overhead, and Devin kept his eyes on the road. 3 years earlier, Devin had been a chassis engineer with a small but respected Formula Heritage racing team, a position he had earned not through connections, but through the kind of obsessive mechanical knowledge that makes other engineers too uncomfortable at dinner because the conversation only ever goes one place. He had also earned it as the only black engineer in a paddock that, on any given race weekend, contained perhaps 200 white ones, which meant that the obsessive mechanical knowledge had to be slightly more obsessive, and the calm under pressure slightly more calm, and the explanations slightly more patient, when a junior mechanic instinctively addressed the question to the white engineer standing beside him. Devin had never mentioned this out loud, not to anyone on the team, not even to Naomi. He had simply absorbed it as part of the cost of the work, the way some men absorb the cost of long hours, and other men absorb the cost of bad weather. His father, Theodore Booker, had spent 40 years documenting the history of American racing manufacturers, much of it on his own time, much of it in archives where the staff had occasionally assumed he was lost on his way to somewhere else. His particular fixation had been Holloway Racing, a short-lived Detroit company that had produced some of the most technically sophisticated factory prototype cars of the early 1960s, before a warehouse fire in 1965 had reportedly destroyed most of what they built. Theodore had talked about the HGT-R0 the way other fathers talked about legendary fish they'd almost caught. The only factory prototype, the first one off the line, gone probably, but not certainly. Devin had grown up with that story the way other children grow up with fairy tales. His mother, Naomi, had died in a traffic accident when Imani was 3 years old, and Devin had left the racing team 6 months later, not because he couldn't handle the work, but because a paddock in Monaco and a 6-year-old in Brooklyn are not compatible in the way that matters most. He opened the repair shop. He learned how to pack school lunches. He kept his father's research binders on a shelf above his workbench. There is a particular kind of expertise that gets built in rooms where nobody is watching. The world tends to notice expertise only when it produces something dramatic, a championship, a discovery, a moment of public recognition. But most expertise lives quietly in the steady accumulation of small observations across years, in the willingness to look at the same kind of thing 1,000 times until you can see what the 999 other lookers missed. Theodore Booker had built that kind of expertise in his son before his son knew it was being built. And Devin, in turn, was building it in Imani, not by lecturing her, but simply by letting her watch him look. Today, he was driving to the Upper East Side for a morning preview at an Ashford Prestige estate sale. The kind of event where old money's furniture and forgotten collections get cataloged and sold. He wasn't there for the Patek Philippe watches or the Impressionist oils. He was there for anything mechanical, anything overlooked, anything in the back of the catalog that the main bidders would ignore. He parked the truck 2 blocks from the address, signed Imani into the complimentary care room that Ashford provided near the main entrance, a small room with beanbag chairs and a television playing cartoons, kissed the top of her head, and walked through the tall front doors of the venue with his flashlight in his jacket pocket and his father's voice somewhere behind his eyes. The main hall was high-ceilinged and already crowded with preview guests, all of them moving with the particular confidence of people accustomed to being in rooms where expensive things are displayed. Devin moved along the edges, reading the lot tags, methodically pausing at a set of vintage tire-changing equipment and a crated collection of dashboard gauges from the 1950s. He noticed, as he always noticed in rooms like this, that he was one of perhaps 3 black people in attendance, and the other 2 were members of the catering staff. He had long since stopped letting that observation slow him down. It was simply weather. You dressed for it and you kept walking. And then he turned the corner near the back wall and stopped. The car was pushed against the wall between 2 storage racks of framed artwork, half blocked by a rolling equipment cart positioned as though whoever had placed it there had been actively trying to keep it out of the way. The paint, a dull olive green, was not original, not by decades. The bodywork was wrong for any production model he recognized, modified or partially stripped, the fender lines altered. But underneath all of that, visible only if you knew precisely where to look, the proportions of the roofline were unusual in a very specific way. Devin crouched down and turned on his flashlight. He was still crouched there, angled beneath the driver's side door, when he heard footsteps stop nearby. He looked up. Vivian Ashford was watching him with an expression that combined mild curiosity and something closer to impatience, the look of someone interrupted by a problem they didn't ask for. She was wearing a charcoal suit that had probably cost more than Devin's monthly shop rent, and her junior appraiser, a younger woman with a clipboard, who Devin would later learn was named Rachel Pierce, stood a half step behind her. Vivian looked at the car, then at Devin, then at the car again, with the brief, efficient appraisal of someone who has already decided. "This lot has no real value," she said, her voice carrying cleanly in the high-ceilinged room. "It's here as a courtesy to the estate family. We didn't want to refuse them." She paused, letting the silence settle, then added with a small precision that landed exactly where she intended it to. "I'm not sure this preview is the right fit for certain budget ranges." A few of the other preview guests nearby glanced over. 1 or 2 almost smiled. Devin did not stand up immediately. He looked at the car for another 2 seconds, the flashlight still in his hand, and then he stood and met Vivian's eyes without any particular expression. He had received versions of that sentence in many rooms before. The phrasing was always elegant, plausibly innocent, deniable if challenged. the intent was always the same. "Thank you for letting me know," he said. She moved on. Devin turned back to the car and looked at the firewall through the gap behind the fender. Rachel Pierce lingered for a moment, not obviously just a beat longer than she needed to. And when Devin glanced at her, she looked away first. A man in a black suit appeared briefly at the edge of the hall. Heavy-set Rolex on the wrist, the easy movement of someone who spent a great deal of time in rooms like this and had stopped noticing them years ago. He was Bradley Kessler, a mid-level collector and dealer who had been buying and flipping specialty automotive lots for 2 decades. He looked at Lot 47 with the quick, practiced glance of someone sorting through a bin for something worth saving. Found nothing that interested him and moved on through the doorway to the care room. Devin could see Imani standing at the threshold, copper under her arm, looking out at him. He gave her a small nod. She disappeared back inside. There is a thing worth saying gently here before the story moves forward. The world is full of rooms in which someone decides in the first 3 seconds of looking at you what you are worth and what you are doing there. Sometimes they say it out loud. More often they don't have to. The temptation in those rooms is to spend your energy convincing them they were wrong. But the people who tend to come out of those rooms with what they came for are usually the ones who decided a long time before they walked in that the assessment in someone else's eyes was not their job to manage. Their job was the work in front of them. Devin's father had taught him that without ever using those words. He had taught it by example in archives and in workshops, and in long Saturday afternoons spent looking at engines that other people had given up on. And on a Tuesday morning in a dusty auction hall, that lesson was about to be worth a great deal. Devin pocketed the flashlight and walked to the registration desk. The bidding room filled to about 60% capacity for the main session, and it thinned considerably after the marquee lots, a collection of estate jewelry, and 2 significant paintings cleared in the first 40 minutes. Lot 47 was called near the end of the session after the crowd had redistributed into smaller clusters of people checking their phones and finishing their coffee. The auctioneer and Ashford staff member filling in for the final stretch announced it with the same brisk, neutral tone used for everything else. Lot 47 automotive item estimated 5,000 to 8,000 sold as is. No warranty, no reserve. Bidding opens at 3,000. 3,000 became 5,000 in the first 30 seconds, which surprised nobody. And then the room went quiet again, the way rooms go quiet when nobody particularly wants something. Devin raised his paddle at 8,000. Bradley Kessler, positioned in a far corner with his arms crossed, noticed the bid and looked across the room for the first time with genuine attention. He raised his own paddle 9,000 with the automatic reflex of a man who dislikes losing to anyone, even things he doesn't actually want. Devin 11,000. Bradley Kessler studied him across the room. The work jacket, the careful posture, the way the man was watching the car rather than the auctioneer, and then he set his paddle down on the armrest. "Not worth it," his expression said. "Whatever this is, it isn't worth a bidding war." The gavel came down. Rachel Pierce was handling the paperwork at the side table, and she slid the bill of sale across the counter without making it obvious that she was watching Devin's face. "What did you see in it?" she asked, quiet enough that it wouldn't carry. Devin signed his name on the line. "I'm not certain yet," he said, "but I think I'll know by the end of the week." Imani was waiting by the main entrance with a volunteer copper on her shoulder, watching the loading crew attach the small crane hook to the car's chassis. "It's really dirty," she said when Devin lifted her up so she could see better. "It's been waiting a long time," he said. He buckled her into the truck, glanced in the rearview mirror at the car now secured on the flatbed behind them, and drove back across the bridge toward Brooklyn. He worked alone in the shop that first night after Imani was asleep. The overhead LED bars turned the space a clean, shadowless white, and Devin moved around the car in a slow, outward-in pattern, the same approach his father had always used, starting with the body and working toward what the body was hiding. The welds on the inner structure were the first thing. Not amateur work, not production line automation. These were hand-applied spot welds, with a distinctive spacing pattern that dated to a specific period and a specific tier of fabrication. professional race team construction, circa early 1960s. He photographed everything with his phone, each frame composed carefully enough that the resolution would hold under magnification. He worked without music, which was his habit. When something required the kind of concentration that sound interrupted, he opened the hood. The engine block sat in the bay, with the quiet authority of something that had been built to do one specific thing extremely well. He angled the flashlight toward the left face of the block, the inner surface, the one most people ignored because it faced the firewall and required you to essentially put your head inside the engine bay to see it. The casting mark was there, pressed into the iron and raised numerals. March 1963. March 1963. Devin did not make a sound. He held the light steady and read the mark 3 times. His father had described this mark in an audio recording that Devin had transferred to his phone years ago and listened to so many times he could recite it from memory. Theodore's voice on the recording was warm and slightly hoarse. The voice of a man who had taught Sunday school for 30 years before he ever taught his son how to read a casting date. If you ever find a block cast in March of '63 with the HGT prefix on the chassis, you look for the chassis plate immediately. Don't stop for anything. He withdrew his head from the engine bay, stood up straight, and for a moment, he simply breathed. The chassis plate in the standard location had been removed. The mounting holes were there, slightly darkened with age, the thread pattern intact, but empty. This was not unusual for a car that had passed through many hands over 60 years. What mattered was the secondary location. Factory race cars of that era almost always had a backup identification point. A fallback stamp applied by the build team placed somewhere inconvenient enough that a casual disassembly would miss it. Devin removed the glove compartment housing 4 screws, a 10-minute job, and reached into the recess behind it with a handheld lamp. The stamp was there, cut directly into the frame rail. 6 characters. HGTR 0001. He sat down on the shop floor with his back against the rear wheel and stayed there for a while. HGTR-0001. The chassis number of the Holloway HGT-R0, the only one ever built. The car that the historical record said had burned in the Holloway Racing warehouse fire on the 14th of November, 1965. He got up, went back to the firewall, and checked the third thing. Behind the engine bay, pressed between the 2 layers of the firewall structure, a hand-welded reinforcement bar ran diagonally across the upper section. The weld angle was not perfectly symmetrical. It was not meant to be. It was the deliberate signature of a craftsman who worked by feel rather than jig. Approximately 73 degrees of angle, a habit so individual it had been documented in a single technical history paper published 30 years ago by the National Automotive History Institute. The paper's author had described the technique as belonging exclusively to one-man chief fabricator Harold J. Larkin, who had hand-welded every Holloway factory prototype from 1962 through 1965. Imani appeared at the shop doorway at 3 o'clock in the morning, her hair uncombed, copper, hanging from one hand, bare feet on the concrete step. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," Devin said. "Go back to sleep." She looked at him, then at the car with the evaluating gaze that children deploy when they suspect adults are underreporting. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Devin looked at the car for a long moment. "I think I might have," he said. She padded back to bed. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 2 years. Dr. Edward Larkin was 72 years old, retired from the directorship of the National Automotive History Institute, and the only living authority on Holloway Racing's factory operations. He was also the son of Harold J. Larkin. Devin had met him twice in person, once as a child when his father had brought him to a conference in Detroit, and once as an adult when Devin was still with the racing team, and Dr. Larkin had come to authenticate a set of period documents. When Devin called at 8 in the morning on the 3rd day, he did not explain the full situation. He simply read 3 pieces of information from his notes. 03-1963, HGTR-0001, hand-welded firewall bar approximately 73 degrees. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Devin checked to see if the call had dropped. Then Dr. Larkin said in a voice that had become very quiet and very careful, "Send me photographs. Every photograph you have right now." Devin sent 47 images. 2 hours later, Dr. Larkin called back on video. He had a colleague with him, a German academic named Dr. Brandt, one of the few surviving researchers who had worked directly with original Holloway factory records in the 1990s. Dr. Brandt went through the photographs one by one without speaking for close to 20 minutes. When he finally did speak, it was in accented but precise English, and he addressed his first comment, not to Devin but to the image of the firewall bar on the screen in front of him. The weld. He said, 73 degrees. This is Harold's technique. Dr. Larkin translated the weight of that, though it needed no translation. My father welded this car. There was a silence in the call that was different from ordinary silence. The kind that comes when something long believed impossible turns out to be simply unlikely, which is a different category entirely. Dr. Larkin looked at Devin through the screen and spoke directly. If the engine is original, unmolested, unreplaced, and if the chassis stamp is what you say it is, then what you have is the HGT-R0, the only one. There is no second car. The fire destroyed the records and the components, but not the car. Devin asked the question that needed asking. Estimated value. Dr. Larkin was quiet for a moment. We need formal authentication before anyone says a number, but speaking conservatively about the current market for factory prototype race cars of this significance, I would say 7 to 9 million is a careful estimate. It could go higher. Devin ended the call. He set the phone face down on the workbench and stood at the shop window looking out at the narrow street. Across the sidewalk, Imani was in the small fenced yard beside the shop building, walking copper along the top of the fence railing, with great concentration narrating a story to herself in a voice too low to hear. Devin watched her for a long time. Then he turned back to the shop and began preparing the car for a more thorough inspection. The black SUV appeared outside the shop at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 5th day. Devin saw it from the second floor window while he was making coffee, idling engine-tinted glass, the specific quality of stillness that belongs to a vehicle waiting for its driver to do something rather than go somewhere. Bradley Kessler came through the front door without knocking, which was not a surprise because men like Bradley Kessler did not knock on the doors of repair shops. He had a young attorney with him, briefcase, expensive haircut, the slightly rigid bearing of someone who had been told this would be a short meeting. Bradley looked at the shop, the tools hung on pegboard, the lift hydraulics, the calendar from a parts supplier on the wall, with an expression that managed to be simultaneously unimpressed and calculating. His gaze paused for half a second on the photograph of Theodore Booker tacked above the workbench, then moved on as though it had registered nothing. "You bought a car at the Ashford session 2 days ago," he said. "I bought a car," Devin confirmed. "Everything processed correctly. I have the paperwork." Bradley smiled with one side of his mouth. "I'm not here about the paperwork. I want to buy it back from you." The attorney placed an open folder on Devin's workbench, a contract already prepared, a number printed in bold at the top. $200,000. Wire transfer. Same day. Devin did not look at the folder. "No," he said. Bradley paused in the way of a man unaccustomed to that word being the first and only one offered. "You paid $11,500. I'm offering $200,000. That's a reasonable offer." "No," Devin said again the same way. Bradley's expression shifted into something more deliberate, the social smile replaced by the face he presumably wore in negotiations he expected to win. "The estate family has their own attorneys looking at the terms of the original sale. There may be a question about whether items of exceptional undisclosed value were properly represented in the estate inventory." The attorney shifted his weight slightly, which told Devin that this particular argument had some technical merit and some significant gaps. The lot was sold as is. No warranty, no representation of value, Devin said. Ashford Prestige made no claims about the car in either direction. I reviewed the sale terms before I placed a bid. The purchase is legally complete. The attorney's slight shift became a slight stillness, which was more informative. Bradley studied Devin for a moment with the recalibrating attention of someone who had expected a shorter conversation. Imani appeared in the interior doorway, connecting the shop to the stairwell copper under her arm, looking at the unfamiliar man with the frank curiosity of a 6-year-old who has not yet learned to pretend she isn't looking. Bradley glanced at her, then back at Devin. And when he looked at Devin again, something in his expression had changed. A new calculation, a different kind of leverage being considered. Devin did not look at Imani. 300,000, Bradley said. Final. Devin turned his head toward the doorway. Imani, he said very calmly. Go upstairs, please. When the sound of her footsteps had faded on the stairs, Devin looked at Bradley Kessler and said in a voice that was quiet and completely even, "You should get in your car and leave before I call my attorney." Bradley Kessler left. He paused at the door and turned back once, not to speak, just to look at the car on the lift, still in its olive green paint, still battered and dusty, and to any eye but the right one entirely worthless. His expression was not the expression of a man who had given up. Devin watched the SUV pull away, picked up his phone and called Dr. Larkin. "We need to move faster," he said. Dr. Edward Larkin drove down from Boston the next morning in his old Volvo, arriving at the Brooklyn shop at 10 o'clock with a leather document case under one arm and a 35mm film camera in a canvas bag over his shoulder. He parked at the curb, came through the open roll-up door and stopped just inside, looking at the car from 15 feet away, as still as someone who has waited a very long time for something and is not sure yet whether it is what they hoped. He set his bags down and approached slowly, the way you approach something fragile, not because the car was fragile, but because the moment was. He crouched beside the engine bay, and when he pressed his palm flat against the diagonal weld bar on the firewall, his voice was low and not quite steady. "This is my father's weld." He was not talking to Devin. He was talking to the metal or to a version of the room that existed some 60 years before the present one. The authentication took 3 hours. Dr. Larkin worked with the methodical patience of a man who had spent 50 years doing this, photographing everything on film. He did not trust digital for records of this significance, and cross-referencing each finding against documents he had brought in the leather case, original Holloway factory blueprints, his father's hand-annotated build logs, a fragmentary set of supplier invoices from 1962 and 63. The chassis stamp matched. The block casting date matched. The weld geometry matched. And then Dr. Larkin found something that even Devin had not found because it required knowing specifically where to look and why it might be there. Tucked into a narrow recess along the inner dash rail, clipped to the frame steel with a small metal fastener, was a cylinder of thin plastic housing, the kind of improvised preservation case that a careful man might construct from materials available in a factory tool room. Inside the cylinder, rolled around a short wooden dowel, was a single sheet of paper. It was a build sheet, a factory production record dated the 31st of March, 1963. Chassis designation HGT-R0001. Engine designation HBR-V8-0003. Sign-off line at the bottom. H.J. Larkin, Senior Fabricator. The handwriting was the compact left-leaning cursive of someone who had written production notes in the margins of blueprints for 30 years. Dr. Larkin held the paper in both hands without speaking for a very long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "He hid it here," he said. "He knew the car wouldn't be burned. He hid the proof." Devin stood at the doorway of the shop, his hands in his pockets, the late afternoon light coming in at an angle across the floor. Imani had come down from upstairs and was standing beside him, her small hand wrapped around two of his fingers, watching the old man at the workbench with the gravity of a child who understands that something important is happening, even if she cannot name it. It is worth pausing here just for a moment on the small detail of a man hiding a piece of paper inside a car in 1963 so that another man, a stranger he would never meet, could find it 60 years later and prove what the official record had gotten wrong. Harold Larkin did not know who Devin Booker was. He did not know who Theodore Booker was. He did not know that a small black boy in Detroit would one day grow up to be an engineer who taught his own son how to look at things carefully. He simply did the work in front of him and trusted that somewhere down the line a careful person would find what he had left. That is in the end a quiet kind of faith. Most of what we do in a single lifetime is for people we will never meet in ways we will never see. The kindness is in doing the work well anyway. Devin was about to inherit not just a car, but a chain of careful hands stretching back across decades. And the only debt that chain carried with it was the one he would pay forward to a 6-year-old standing beside him in a doorway, holding a stuffed fox under one arm. By 5 o'clock, Dr. Larkin had signed and notarized the formal authentication certificate. The document stated in the precise and unambiguous language of someone who had spent a career preparing to write exactly this sentence that the vehicle-bearing chassis, number HGTR-0001 engine, casting dated March 1963, and factory-build sheet signed by Harold J. Larkin was the Holloway HGT-R0 factory prototype. The only surviving example, and that its estimated fair market value in the current collector automobile market fell between $7,500,000 and $9 million, with potential for a higher realized price at auction given the historical uniqueness of the piece. Dr. Larkin shook Devin's hand at the front door, holding it for a moment before letting go. "How did you find it?" he asked. Devin glanced down at Imani, who was leaning against the doorframe, copper balanced on top of her head. "My father taught me how to look," Devin said. Dr. Larkin nodded, got in his Volvo, and drove north into the early evening. Devin went inside and called the main line for Ashford Prestige Auctions. The call was transferred twice before reaching Vivian Ashford directly, which was unusual for an unsolicited inbound. She answered with the practiced efficiency of someone managing a dense schedule, and Devin said what needed to be said without preamble. He owned the Holloway HGT-R0. It had been formally authenticated by Dr. Edward Larkin, and he wanted to sell it through Ashford Prestige in a dedicated single-lot auction. There was a silence on the line that was different from the processing pauses of normal business conversation. Longer and shaped differently. The silence of someone rearranging a mental picture rather than retrieving information. "Lot 47, Vivian said. "Yes," Devin said. Another silence. "I'll need to see the authentication documents. Dr. Larkin is available for a direct call if you need it." There was the sound of something being set down carefully on a hard surface. "We'll schedule a special session," she said. "Friday. We'll handle all the preparation on our end." Her voice had retained its professional precision, but had shed something else, a particular quality of controlled authority that had been present in every previous exchange. The vocal equivalent of looking at someone from a height. Devin said, "Thank you," and ended the call. That evening, Imani sat on the high stool beside his workbench while he worked on a 1968 muscle car that had nothing remarkable about it except that it ran and its owner needed it back by the following week. "Are you selling the dirty car?" she asked. "Yes," Devin said, not looking up from the carburetor he was rebuilding. "Why, you just got it." Devin set down the float and thought about how to answer in a way that was true and small enough to carry. "Because some things don't belong in just one person's shop," he said. Imani considered this, turning copper over in her hands. "Like a library book," she said. Devin looked at her. "Exactly like a library book," he said. She seemed satisfied with that. She watched him work until her eyes started closing. And then he carried her upstairs without waking her, pulled the blanket up, kissed her forehead, and went back down to finish the carburetor. On the small dresser beside her bed sat a framed photograph of Naomi smiling at a kitchen table, somewhere holding Imani as a newborn. Devin paused at the doorway and looked at it for a moment before turning off the light. Then he went back down to the shop. Ashford Prestige sent the press release at 8 on Friday morning. Special single lot session, 1963, Holloway HGT-R0, sole surviving factory prototype authenticated by Dr. Edward Larkin. By 1003 international automotive history publications had picked up the announcement. 12 international bidders had registered for remote access. The main bidding room at the Ashford venue had more people in it by 11:30 than it typically saw at its flagship spring sales. Devin drove across the bridge in the same pickup. Imani beside him in a navy dress with copper on her lap. He wore a white button-down shirt and dark trousers. No suit, no tie. Nothing that would have made him unrecognizable to anyone who had seen him 3 days earlier in a work jacket crouching beside a car nobody wanted. He parked, took Imani's hand, and walked through the main entrance. People looked not because of what he was wearing, but because his name was at the top of the press release, and a few of the collectors and dealers in the lobby had the particular alertness of people who have recently recalibrated an assumption. A few of those assumptions Devin suspected were being recalibrated for more than one reason. He did not slow down to notice. Rachel Pierce met them at the main door with 2 access cards. She looked at Imani with genuine warmth. "What's your name?" she asked, crouching slightly to meet the child's eye level. "Imani," the girl said, "and this is Copper." Rachel smiled the kind of smile that belongs to a person rather than a professional role, and led them to the seller's waiting area, a quiet room off the main hall with upholstered chairs and a window overlooking the street. Bradley Kessler was already in the bidding room when Devin walked through before the session began. Seated in the second row, arms folded, jaw set in the particular expression of a man who has decided he can still salvage something from a situation that has moved substantially against him. He had registered to bid. Devin noted this and said nothing about it. Dr. Larkin was in the front row, his leather document case on the seat beside him, watching the car, which had been brought in on a low platform, cleaned carefully, but not restored, every original surface intact and honest, with the patient attention of someone sitting with a very old friend. Vivian Ashford stepped up to the podium. The room quieted. She introduced the lot with the precise historical language that the authentication documents provided, reading from notes she had clearly prepared carefully. And then she opened the bidding at $2 million. $2 million became $4 million in the first 15 seconds, 3 international phone bidders coming in simultaneously from the remote lines. $4 million became $5.8 million before 30 seconds had elapsed. Bradley Kessler raised his paddle at $6 million and the figure climbed past him. $6.5 million from a collector on screen, $7 million from Kessler, $7.8 million from the screen. Kessler, $8 million. The screen went quiet. Vivian looked out over the room, her voice steady. 8 million going once. No movement from the screens. Devin was standing at the side of the room near the wall, one hand resting on Imani's shoulder. She didn't understand the numbers. They were too large, too abstract, outside the scale of anything in her daily life. But she was watching her father's face and reading what was there with the acuity that children develop when they have learned to pay close attention to the adults they depend on. 8 million going twice. The room held its breath. The gavel came down. Sold. $8,200,000. The room released applause, the murmur of voices, the soft percussion of phones being raised. Bradley Kessler stood, buttoned his jacket without looking at anyone, and walked out through the side door with the unhurried gait of a man managing a defeat in public. Dr. Larkin did not stand. He sat in the front row and looked at the car on the platform with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes gone bright and wet. Devin looked down at Imani. She looked up at him. She didn't ask about the number. She held Copper tighter with one arm and put her other hand into his. Rachel Pierce took Imani to the small lounge near the side corridor with a tablet loaded with cartoons. And Imani went willingly, Copper already settled on the armrest beside her before the door was halfway closed. Vivian Ashford found Devon in the hallway outside the main room, not the imposing corridor of the front entrance, but the quieter passage that led to the administrative offices, where the ceiling was lower and the lighting was warmer and there was nothing to perform for. She came alone. No clipboard, no assistant, none of the practiced composure that typically accompanied her public movements. She stood across from him with the posture of someone making a deliberate effort at something. And when she said his name, it was without the particular inflection that comes from holding a position of advantage. Devin Booker. He waited. "What did you see in that car?" she asked. Not the rhetorical version of the question, the real one. He considered her for a moment. "The firewall reinforcement bar," he said. "The weld angle 73 degrees, the signature of a specific fabricator. You saw that when you were crouching beside it on Tuesday morning. I saw it in the preview photographs that were sent to registered attendees the week before. I was already suspicious when I walked through the door. I needed to confirm it in person." She was quiet for a moment, and he watched something move through her expression. Not the managed shift of someone adjusting their professional position, but the involuntary rearrangement of someone processing the specific weight of what they did. "I said what I said in front of a lot of people," she said. Not an apology yet, a statement offered precisely. "You did," Devin said. She looked at him steadily. "Your daughter was there." "Imani has seen a lot of things," Devin said, and his voice was neither forgiving nor hard, simply honest, the way very few people are when they have something to forgive and choose not to make theater of it. "She knows that being right doesn't mean people will believe you right away. She's learning. That's okay." Vivian held his gaze for a moment longer than was strictly comfortable. "Your father, what did he do?" "He passed away 4 years ago. He was an engineer. He spent most of his life looking at things other people had stopped looking at. And you..." He glanced toward the lounge door where Imani was. "I love my daughter," he said simply. "The cars are how I take care of that the right way." Vivian stood for a moment in the particular stillness of someone who has just heard something that requires no response and knows it. "I'll send a formal letter of apology on Monday," she said. "That's not necessary," Devin said. "Not cold, not performed magnanimity either. Just the statement of a man who decided on Tuesday morning, crouching in a dusty hall, that he had no use for other people's opinions of what he could see. But if you want to send it, that's your decision to make." He gave her a small, neutral nod and turned to collect his daughter. 2 weeks passed. Devin did not move. The shop did not buy a new truck, did not hire a new sign for the front of the building. He opened a trust account for Imani at the credit union 3 blocks away. A significant sum set aside in a structure that would give her options when she was old enough to need them and have no strings attached to any of them. He kept the remainder in a business account and made plans to expand the shop by 1 bay, which would allow him to take on a second mechanic and stop working every Saturday alone. He had a specific person in mind for the second mechanic position, a young woman named Tasha who lived 2 blocks over and had been hanging around the shop since she was 14, asking him questions about transmissions that her own father had told her were not for girls. Devin had been answering those questions for 3 years. He thought it might be time to put her name on a paycheck. Nothing about the outside of the building changed. The same parts supplier calendar was still on the wall. The same coffee maker with the cracked handle sat on the same shelf. Dr. Larkin came by one last time before returning to Boston, pulling up in the Volvo with a flat package under his arm. Inside was an old black and white photograph, factory floor, 1963. 2 men standing beside a car that was unmistakably the HGT-R0 in its original racing configuration. The bodywork intact and perfect. One of the men was Harold Larkin, younger than Devin had ever imagined him, squinting slightly in the factory lighting. Dr. Larkin had written on the back in the same compact, left-leaning cursive as his father, "To the man who found what my father left behind." Devin hung it on the wall above his workbench between a wiring diagram for a 1972 coupe and a photograph of his own father standing in front of a race car in a Detroit paddock sometime in the early 1990s. Theodore Booker in that photograph was perhaps 40 years old, holding a clipboard, smiling at someone just out of frame. He had been the only black man on the team that day, too. Devin had stopped counting those things a long time ago, but he had not stopped noticing them. He suspected he never would. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the sale, Devin was on his back under the 1968 muscle car, the unremarkable one, the one whose owner just needed it running when Imani climbed onto the high stool and began arranging copper on the top of the tool chest with architectural precision. "What are you doing today?" she asked, the way she always asked, as though the answer would determine something important. "Looking at a car," Devin said from under the chassis. "Is it a good one?" "I don't know yet. I'm still looking." She thought about this. "Like the dirty one," she said. "Like the dirty one," he agreed. She nodded, satisfied, and returned to Copper's arrangement. That evening, while he was locking up the shop, his phone buzzed on the workbench. A text from an unfamiliar number, though the initials at the bottom identified the sender without ambiguity. "I want to apologize for what I said that morning. Not because of what the car turned out to be, because I judged before I looked, and I know now what that cost and what it could have cost. VA." Devin read it once, then a second time. He typed a reply. "Thank you for writing this. DB." He set the phone down on the bench, turned off the overhead lights, and stood for a moment in the dark of the shop before heading upstairs. Through the single window above the workbench, the streetlight outside threw a long rectangle across the floor, and in it, the 1968 muscle car sat on the lift. Nothing special, nothing hidden, just a car that needed work. He looked at it for a moment anyway. Habit. The habit his father had given him. The habit of looking at ordinary things long enough and carefully enough that ordinary sometimes turns out to be something else entirely. There are things people walk past because there is no obvious reason to stop. There are things that sit in the back of rooms tagged and priced and largely ignored, waiting for the one person in the room who knows where to look and why. Most people never meet that person. And that person, quiet, unhurried, wrong by the world's first accounting, and right by everyone that follows, almost never announces themselves. They just crouch down in the back of a hall with a small flashlight, look at the undercarriage of a car that everyone else has written off, and see what no one else took the time to find. Not because they were lucky, because someone a long time ago taught them how to look. If there is anything to carry away from a story like this, it is probably something gentler than a moral. Not a rule, not a saying for a refrigerator magnet, just a small observation. The people who change the shape of their own lives are rarely the loudest in any room. They are usually the ones who learned somewhere along the way that the work of paying attention is a kind of love. Attention to a car, attention to a child's question at 6:45 on a Tuesday morning, attention to a weld bar nobody else saw at an angle nobody else measured. Devin Booker did not become a different man on the day that gavel came down. He had been that man for a long time in a small shop in Brooklyn, packing school lunches, rebuilding carburetors, and brushing out a 6-year-old's hair on Sunday nights. The $8 million only made visible what had already been true, and that perhaps is the quiet thing worth remembering. The lives we are building most carefully are usually the ones nobody is watching us build. We do the work anyway. We teach our children to look. And one day, sometimes, the world catches up.